Welcome to the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years.
Okay, let's get into our next Shiur, our next Tzurba Rabbanan Shiur. We're in volume number 20 of Tzurba Rabbanan, the Lax Family Edition, the volumes, and the Niezov Family Volume. We are up to Shiur Gimel in our volume. Shiur Gimel, the first Shiur relating to animals. We're going to have a few Shiur relating to animals. Animals, after all, are, even if one doesn't have a pet, which for sure there are halachas to talk about, but even if not, there are halachas that we need to know in terms of trapping animals, in terms of killing animals, in terms of using animals on Shabbos. So there is what to talk about. There's what to talk about. We're going to talk about animals doing malacha. That's today's shiur. An introduction to trapping animals, tzad, a unique malacha. That's all in today's shiur. Next year we'll talk about allowances for trapping. Are there any heterim for trapping? Setting a trap. What about trapping a person? What about locking somebody in a room? Is that issues of trapping? So those are all part one. Then we'll have to talk about in the following shiurim, in the next shiur, killing animals, dangerous animals, moving animals, feeding animals. All of these are issues that come up. So let's get into shiur number 3 in this volume, which is dedicated in memory of Dave Freeman. And that starts on page 121. Page 121, animals performing malachas. This is an amazing discussion in that it is something that you're not allowed to do, maybe even mid'oraisa, but it's not included possibly in Melecha Shabbos. It's for sure not in the 39. We know there are 39 Melecha Shabbos, learned out Shabbos Daf Ayin Gimel in the Bavli. All 39 Melechas are mentioned there. How do we know 39? Different sources given in the Gemara, but Dumya de Mishkan, whatever they did in the Mishkan, we're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Meleches machsheves. So that's the malachas. But what we're going to talk about today is not within the malachos. Without the malachas, it is one of two topics, one of two headings. Maybe they're overlapping, maybe they're different. There is a topic called Shvisas Behemto, my animal resting on Shabbos, and number 2, there's a topic called Mechamer, working my animal in the field. So those are two, seems to be in Chazal, two different malachas, two different concepts of Isser on Shabbos, and not connected. Again, Rishonim connected, but not connected. Okay, where does it start off? It starts off in the Aseres Dibros. The Torah Aseres Dibros tells me not only can I not do malacha on Shabbos, but the Torah says, in source number 1 in Parshas Yisro, V'yom hashvi Shabbos l'Hashem Elokecha. On the 7th day, it's Shabbos. Lo sasa kol malacha, ata, uvincha, uvitecha, you, your children, avdecha, va'amazcha, uvehemtecha, and your animal. So there's something d'oraisa about your animal. Amira la'akum, we've touched on in the past. Asking a guy to do malacha for me, we paskin that's an issa d'Rabbanan. A d'Rabbanan, there is a smag that says it's d'oraisa, but we paskin d'Rabbanan. D'Rabbanan to ask a guy to do malacha. It's worse to have your animal, or even an animal, do malacha for you. That's what it says. Uvehemtecha v'gercha asher b'sharbecha. And the Torah tells us also in Vo'eschanan, repeat here, giving examples of animals. Source number 2, V'yom hashvi Shabbos l'Hashem Elokecha, lo sa'asa kol malacha, ato v'inchu v'techa, avramazah v'shorcha v'chamarcha v'chol behemtecha, your ox, your donkey, any animal is not allowed to do malacha l'man yanuach, so that there's rest. The Mishnah Baba Kama tells us it doesn't only mean ox and donkey, any animal. Echad shor, source 3. Mishnah Baba Kama in this 5th parak, Echad shor v'echad kol behema u'l'shabbos v'chin chayev v'of v'chayotze bohem. So this is malacha on Shabbos if I do it with my animal, through my animal, that's an iser da'oraisa. But there is this question, what about an onesh? We know if somebody does malach on Shabbos, b'mezid, kares, or skila, depending if there are edim, and b'shogi chatos. What about by an animal? Is it on the same level d'oraisa? So that's a machlokas in the Gemara. All the way at the end of Meshach Shabbos, all the way at the end, source number 4, Shabbos, Kuf Nun Gimel, Kuf Nun Dalid. At the end of Meshach Shabbos, we know Meshach Shabbos is the longest Masechta in Talmud Bavli in words. Right? For some reason, many thought or think that it's brachas. That's not true. Brachas is like even 7th or 8th. Shabbos, Chulin, and Sanhedrin are the top 3 in terms of words. Shabbos is huge, and Sanhedrin has the Parak Chelek, which puts it on the map in this area. Brachas has the why. I remember growing up, I always thought brachas. Brachas has the greatest words per page ratio. That's what brachas has, but it's much shorter. It's 55 dafim. Or so. So Shabbos is more than double that. So here we go. Shabbos Kufnun Gimel all the way at the end. Amar Rabbi Rachama, source number 4. If somebody is mechamer, somebody drives, somebody leads his animal, that's known as mechamer. Achar behemto b'Shabbos b'shogeg chayev chatas b'meizer chayev skila. Wow. Rabbi Rachama says, just like if you do malacha on Shabbos, there's an Isser, skila, and chatas. So too if your animal, again, according to him, it must be looked at as your animal is an extension of you. And therefore, if you do work, and this is the normal way of doing work, this is called your malacha, not your animals. And therefore, chayiv daraisa with karis and skila and chatas. My timer, Amar Rava, Damar Kref. After all, the pasuk says, Lo sasaka malacha, you don't do malacha, and with your animal, don't do malacha. Lo sasaka malacha, ata uvehemtecha. Your animal, similar, comparable to you. Mahu, just like if he does malacha, says Rami Bar Chama, Bishoge chayev chatas, b'meize chayev skila. It's an Issa Daraisa with all of the onshim. Av tonami. So too, if your animal does malacha, Bishoge chayev chatas, b'meize chayev skila. That is Rami Bar Chama. We do not paskin that way. Says Rava. Amar Rava shtei tshuvas b'davar. Says Rava. I'm still in source number 4 here. Page 122. Shtei tshuvas b'davar. Chada. T'chsiv Torah achas. T'chsiv. What does it say in the Torah? Torah achas yelachem la'ose bishgaga. Right? The carbon chatas is mentioned in that pasuk, and that's right next to the pasuk about avodah zarah. Biyad Rama, and we say that's talking about avodah zarah. So we compare the chiyuv of chatas to avodah zarah. Hukshu kol Torah kula avodah zarah. Everything's compared to avodah zarah. That is the hekesh. So what do we say? So ma avodah zara da oven ma'isa begufei hachanami da oven ma'isa begufei. Avodah zara you only chayiv if you do an action yourself, not with your animal. Yourself. I mean, you can be makar of an animal to an avodah zara. That's your act. So just like your act by avodah zara is aser, that's false hachanami. Until you do a ma'isa begufei, you're not going to get a punishment. Chatas, and if there's no chatas, then there's no karis and skila. So that is machlokas. Remember Chama and Rava. If you look on the next daf, Amir Rabbi Yochanan, Kufnun Daled, now on the top of 123, Hamachamer Achar Behemto B'Shabbos, Patami Klum. Rabbi Yochanan says there's no onesh. There's no onesh at all. It might be daraisa, but there's no onesh that Bezdin is going to give a person for being Machamer Achar Behemto. Again, an Isser D'Oraisa in the world of Shabbos that is not included in Losase Kol Malacha. According to the Smag, Amir Lakim's also. But we don't pass in that way. But here, this is the case. Shvisas behemto. So, or bechamer. We didn't get to that. So, bechamer. Padamiklum. Bishoging lo machayev chatas. Bishoging, you're not chayev chatas. Why? Because of the drasha that Rava said. Tukshu kolator kula avodah zara. B'mezid nami lo machayev. Also b'mezid. Why? Because once you say you're not chayev chatas, if you did it b'shogeg because there was no maisa, so that's going to parallel to mezid. As the Gemara says, Ditznan, Hamachalas HaShabbos, B'davar Shachayv Shegazor Chatas, Vaz Dono Skila. Chilul Shabbos, Chatas and Skila go together. Ha'ein Chayav Shegazor Chatas, and Chayav Vaz Dono Skila. There's no Chatas, there's no Skila. And therefore, there's no Dorais Chatas if you did B'shogeg, or Karis or Skila if you did it B'mezid. What about knock it down? What about Malchus? Malchus is the next one for Daraisas. So, Balav Nami Lo Machayev, no. Also not. Why? Because what lav is included. So it's a separate word, behemtach in the Torah, but it's going back on lo sasaka malacha. So that lav in general includes even you're doing malacha. So balav nami lo machayev dahavile lav shenitan lasars bisas bestin, because it's a lav that has included in it the potential for misa in other contexts, and whenever there's potential for misa, the rule is no malchus. For lav shenitan lasars bisas bestin. Ein lokan alav, there is no malchus. As we know, that is the rule for many of the unusual lavim. We know one gets malchus. The pasuk in Gisesi tells us arbam yakenu lo Yosef. That's next due, right? Arbam yakenu is next to the isser of muzzling lo sachsum shor b'disho. So Chazal tell us you only get malchus for a lav that's similar to the lav of muzzling, similar dumya de lav de chasima, and therefore it has to have a maisa, lav sheish b'maisa. It has to have can't have a way to fix it other than getting malchus. It can't be a lav anita klasei, lav anita l'tashlumin. It can't be a lav that has potential for misa, because muzzling never has the potential for misa. It can't be a lav shenit l'shar b'zbezdin. It can't be a lav shebeklalos, an all-inclusive lav, which includes many different facets of the isser. So here is the rule. So you're not going to get misa because you don't get chatas. You're not going to get chatas because of the hekish to avodah zara, and you're not going to get malchus because it's a lav shenit l'shar b'zbezdin. And the Gemara finishes off. Yafilu l'man d'amar lokin. Even if you want to say in general, a lav hanit l'shar b'zbezdin gets malchus, but here you want to get malchus because the emphasis is ata. Hu niyud machayev behemto lo machayev, and that is what we paskin. We paskin mechamer, working with an animal in the field or not even in the field, in your community, in your neighborhood on Shabbos is an issur daraisa, but there's no punishment. Says the Rambam, Hilchot Shabbos, Perek Chaf, Aser lohotzi masa. What kind of malacha are you going to be doing? You could be plowing, you could be harvesting, you could also just be carrying a load, having an animal carry a load for you. Aser lohotzi masa al behema b'Shabbos shenemar lo yaman yanuach sharcha v'chamarcha. So your shor and your chamar have rest. Echad shor v'chamar. And if you did, even though that's a violation of that, of an avera, a daraisa, you're not going to get malchus. Lafi sheisuro b'machlal asay. The Rambam has another element, because part of the mitzvah of your animal resting is the mitzvah's asay of resting. So there's pater from Onesh. Follow lama first, but the Rambam continues. The Rambam says on himself, what do you mean? There's a lav mefurish. No. Lav as the Gemara says, as Rabbi Yochanan says, that we saw in the Mesechus Shabbos. So the Rambam paskins there's no malchus, but he also added in a new facet that we didn't know, and that is it's included in the mitzvah's asay of Shabboson, of Uvayom Hashvi Tishbos, that you should be shoves on Shabbos, and that includes your animal. So does this mean I'm not allowed to let my animal do anything I'm not allowed to do? I'm not allowed to do kotzer, harvest, pick something out of the ground. So I can't let my animal eat in the backyard? So no, you don't go that far. That's what the Mechilta says. No, your animal has to rest. It has to be called rest for him too. Says the Mechilta in Mishpatim, source number 6. Right, so at the end of Mishpatim, when Shabbos comes up again, Shabbos is mentioned many times in the Torah. Hosev lo akasiv nayach echad. Lios tolish b'rakarka v'ochel. L'man yanuach. It says special menucha by your animals. Your animal has to be in a state of rest on Shabbos, which means he should be able to eat lunch. And he can eat grass. Ata omer lakachba. Oh, lo ba'ela shiach b'shenom b'toch beiso. You might think you have to lock up your animal in your house so it doesn't go out. Amart ein zanayich al tzar. That's not going to be menucha for the animal. That's going to be tsar for the animal, and therefore that would be allowed. So this is all what we've spoken about. The end of Mesechus Shabbos talks about mechamer, working with one's animal on Shabbos. Avodah Zara daf tezvav has a different lashon, and that is what's called shvisas behemto. Like we spoke about shvisas kalim earlier, we paskin shvisas kalim is mutter, like Beis Hillel. Shvisas behemto, that's aser. That's aser. Says the Gemara, Avodah Zarah Tezvav, source number 7. Adam mitzuvah al shvisas behemto b'Shabbos. A person is mitzuvah on shvisas behemto b'Shabbos. So there now, are there any differences? Is this just an overlap? Shvisas behemto and machamer. So suggest some of the Rishonim go in the Arzarua. Is it your animal or your friend's animal? There's no isser for if you see an animal that's not yours doing work out there. So that's not a problem. If you use your friend's animal to do malacha, is that shvisas behemto? It's not a violation of shvisas behemto if it's not my animal. But it's going to violate machamer. It doesn't have to be your animal to be machamer. So the Arzarua assumes that driving the animal, machamer, is a lo saseh of the animal performing any malacha, but it only applies to one's own animal, says the Arzarua. And he says that a person can't be chayev even for machamer unless, even if he rented it from a guy, which is a machlokas. Look at the Arzarua. Source number 8. Rabbeinu Ephraim zatzal kasaf. If I rented an animal from a guy and I was machamer, I used it to plow, to carry, I'm chayev chatas. Right, so that's pascha again, like the If you actively were involved, that could be daraisa. But if it's just your animal working, then we say we paskin that there's no carbon. The schiris v'she'ela avoksas kanya is a little. There's a mixas kinyan by rental or by borrowing. The Arzuro doesn't like it. Veno nira be'enai aval mikol makom hov enofak mipumi to gaon tov lizar. He said it's better to be zahir. So that's what the Arzuro says, that it applies only. He quotes Rabbi Nefraim that it'll apply if you rent an animal from a guy, but and he doesn't like that. But if you look at most Rishonim, the Ran and other Rishonim say that there is a chiluk between mechamer and shvisas behemto, as I just alluded to. The mitzvahs asay, like the Rambam says before, of shvisas behemto, that only applies to your animal, shvisas behemto. But mechamer, that's just doing malacha. Just like if you use somebody else's knife to do shchita, you're still going to violate shchita. It doesn't have to be yours. So using your friend's animal and somebody else's animal is a violation of the iser of mechamer. Says the Ran. There in Avodah Zarah Daf Dalad. Right? This is based on that Gemara in Avodah Zarah Daf Tezvav. It's Dalad on my base on the Daf Yarif. Shvisas behemto ein kan safek. She'ed behema zu shelo ela shelo keach. There's no suffix. If it's not your animal, you're not going to violate shvisas behemto, but you're going to violate mechamer. Mechamer, which is working with an animal on Shabbos. Tekivan d'shamalakale, since the animal listened to your voice, v'azla machmate, and came because of you, ein hefresh, bein behemto lebein meschavera. There's no difference. Just like you use your friend's anything to do malacha, if you use your friend's animal, isser zehu atzmo v'yosa, because he's doing it itself. So we assume this way. Many achronim assume, like the Ran, that one would be chayiv for driving anyone's animal, but the say shvisas behemto is only from your animal. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. The Mishnah Berurah says, summarizing in source number 10, afilum ein behema shelo tzarech lizar bekach de iser mechamer shayich afilu b'mesacherim. Like the Ran said, iser mechamer applies even if it's not your animal, because it's just doing malacha with an animal. V'kol shekenim behema shelo, if it's your animal, then there's ikatarti mechamer v'shvisas behemto. So summarizing and giving some examples. Says the Shmir Shabbos. Again, does it come up so much on Shabbos in our daily lives? Not too much, but this is the background for other malachas that we'll see. Right? We're generally not working with animals on Shabbos, but the Shmir Shabbos discusses it, source number 11. Midine shvisas behemta, who? Sheba'aleh chayev lid'og lakach. An owner must be concerned. Your animal should not go out and do malach and do hotzah if you live in a place without an erev. Bishasha masa while it has a burden. Even if it was on there before Shabbos. Bichlal masa, and what is a masa? Kol davar she'inu bal l'shmirasa haragila shagufa behema. Anything that's not there for the basic protection of the animal. If the animal itself is wearing it, like the animal's freezing, and you put a blanket on the animal and wrap it around, that's just pashtus, shmira, basic shmira, and therefore that's not called a masa. Similar to the discussions in Masechah Shabbos about a person is allowed to walk outside without an erev, as long as it's a beged and bottle to the person, but not a masa. So shmira regila pirusha shmira lutovas habehema could go in shmira b'nei kar, shmira b'nei kol tzar acher, right? Because of the cold, because of any other tzar. Aval ein bechlal zeh, but any type of shmira that you put on an animal so the animal doesn't hurt others or damage others, that's not included. Let's say you have a wild dog and you have to keep a muzzle so that he doesn't bite others. So that's a masa. That's a masa because that animal doesn't need that for its own, it's protecting others, but that's a masa. Ein b'chal zeh shmira sheshomer mizbehema k'dei shelo tazik. If you go on a zamam, the muzzle, shenosam alpia, shelo tinshach, doesn't bite, or shelo tocha, doesn't eat in other fields. Harizet, that's b'chal masa. So what about, where this comes up, is what about a leash? A dog with a leash, a dog with a collar around it. So do you really need that for the shmira of the dog? It's indirect, because if somebody finds it, they'll return it to you. But to go out with a collar walking a dog in a place without an erev, that is a serious shaila. If there's an erev, there's an erev. And all you have to worry about is touching the dog, maybe, but as we'll get to. But if there is no erev, says the Shmir Shabbos, behema shalatzarach shmirasa yish l'kshar chevel saviv savarav. You have to tie a rope around its neck for its own protection, because then it'll go out and get hurt. Mutul alicha b'shazarabim b'chevel zeh. Then you can allow to have this leash in this with this rope, as long as you don't have any extra, like you're holding the leash and from the other side of your hand there's extra, that's not allowed. You have to have the minimum length of a leash that is that works. Vachakatzelo yivlo tevach echad yoser michutz liyada molochoso. V'gam yakpid shechelak achevel shebohu molich hazabehema. Also be careful that the part of the rope that you're being molich hatali beino letzavar behema, that's between your hand and the dog's neck, doesn't hang all the way down. Well, yiskariv kedei tefach echad samach la'aretz. It shouldn't come within a tefach of the ground. Ukshakarech, and by the way, when you put the rope on, when you put the leash on, you shouldn't lean on the animal. We'll get to that. Hishtamshus bebehema. Hishtamshus be. We spoke about trees, but the same parallel halachas will be here too. Simin heker atoli atzavar shel behema. So the Shmir Shabbos paskas, if you have a collar, simin heker, a collar, an identification tag that hangs around the neck of the animal, eina shmir regila. That's considered extra shmira. Extra shmira. And you can't have him go in a place where it's usher to be mitaltel. Lefichach al ba'alei klavim lahakpid. Wow, the Shmir Shabbos says if you own a dog, you gotta be careful. Shalahotzi kalavehem b'makam shein erev kshetag al tzavarim. Don't take your dogs to a place without an erev when they have their tag, when they have some type of disc. On the kondiskis mitam arashus, that you have to have a tag on for the authorities, so don't go out on Shabbos when a place without an erev. Ulam siman hekar kavua, if there's something that is part of the animal's body, masmer, we have a nail stuck into the ear of the animal, or sometimes cows have this, so that's part of the animal, that's batel, because you can't take that off. Okay. There is a Mishnah also in Maseches Beitzah that talks about riding animals. Right, riding animals is also d'Rabbanan on Shabbos. Riding a horse, riding a donkey, that is also d'Rabbanan on Shabbos. Shema, because when you ride an animal, often you might want to lead the animal properly, and you might rip off a branch of a tree so that you could use it to hit the animal to go straight. So the Gemara Mishnah says in Beitzah, Daflamet Vav, Elohim Mishum Shvus, source number 12, Lo Rochvin Al Gabe Behema. There's no riding on an animal. Gezerah Shema Yachtoch Zomara. You might come to rip off a branch, and that is what we paskin. There's no riding on animals on Shabbos. Vein Rochvin Al Gabe. We're going to get to even moving animals and touching animals. I'll have to talk about that. What about pets? But that's what the Shulchan Aruch says in Shin Hey. Ein Rochvin Al Gabe Behema v'lo nidin al maleh. You can't lean on an animal. Same rules as a tree. Even what's attached to the animal, but 2 steps removed. Stadin is mutter on a tree and mutter on an animal as well. So this was topic 1 relating to animals, doing work with animals. It probably doesn't come up that often in most of our houses, but sud could really come up. The malacha of tzeda, the malacha of trapping. There are a number of factors, and today we're just going to do background, number of factors relating to the issue of tzeda da'araisa. Number 1, what type of animal is this? Is this a type of animal that's normally trapped? If it's not going to be da'araisa, as we'll see. So number 1, is it an animal that's normally trapped by the world? Right? People trap these animals for their food, for their skin, for their beauty, to put in the zoo. That has to be daraisa. If not, then it's at most derabanan. Number 2, what state was the animal in before you came along? Was the animal already in a state of nitzod, of being trapped beforehand, or not? Or you're making it nitzod? That's the second requirement. And number 3, does your action then make it from eino nitzod to nitzod? So what type of animal is it? What state was it beforehand? And what did your Maisa accomplish? Right? Those are the 3 questions to ask. So the Mishnah in Shabbos tells us that there are, the Gemara, it's not a Mishnah, the Gemara tells us that there are different types of animals. Source number 14. We're on page 129, starting the issue of tzad. So the Gemara tells us, Tana Rabbanan, Hatzad Chagavin, if somebody traps grasshoppers, locusts, gazin, tsirin, hornets, yitusha, mosquitoes, b'Shabbos, chayiv dever be'er. Meir says any animal you trap, you're going to be chayiv daraisa on Shabbos. We don't paskin that way. V'chachavim omrim, kol shebemino nitzod chayiv, v'she'eno bemino nitzod pater. It depends if it's mino nitzod. What does that mean? Its category, its type is trapped by the world at large. So it's only going to be daraisa if it's a type of animal that's mino nitzod. If it's ein b'mino nitzod, people don't usually trap these for trapping. Maybe they trap them to kill them, to prevent them from doing something, but that's not called trapping them for their need. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. 15 Shita Zayin, Kol Mino Nitzod Chayev Alav. If it's Mino Nitzod, it's going to be daraisa. Ein b'mino nitzod. If it's the second level down, mosquitoes, locusts, Pater Aval Aser, that's going to be Aser D'Rabbanan. That's only Asa Durabanan. Hilkach, Zevuvim, flies. Aval B'Shem Mino Nitzot, Asa Lezuta. Nobody traps flies because they want the flies. But trap Iguad is still going to be Asa Durabanan, as we'll see. So this has. What if you have a fly in your house? You want to get it out. You have a bee in your sukkah. So we'll have to see. So this is issue one. What type of animal is it? The Avnei Nezer explains. You have it in the Tshuva there, in the next source. Why is it so important? Animals are animals. Who cares whether it's Mino Nitzot or ain't Mino Nitzot? Why does it only Daraisa if it's Mino Nitzot? Says the Avnei Nezer beautiful. Because Seder is like one of those malachas. We have 2 or 3 malachas like this. Where, remember Tosfos on the Beis in Shabbos says Hotzah is a malacha gerua. Hotzah is an inferior type of malacha. Why? You don't really accomplish anything. You have this item and now you moved it to over there. You know, when you clean something, when you shech something, when you color something, when you plant something, okay, you've accomplished something. But here you just took this from place A to place B. So Tosfos calls that a malacha gerua. It's an inferior type of malacha. Says the Avnei Nezer, tzad in a way is even worse. At least you carry something hotzah from place A to place B. By tzad, what do? An animal's here, you put something on top of the animal. There's no change in the animal at all. There's only a change in the animal's relationship with you. Right? What is the definition of tzad? What is the definition of tzad? Right, the top of 129, going back a page, right, many achronim say, trapping an animal to remove the animal's freedom or to bring the animal under your jurisdiction. Those are 2 different emphases. So we'll have to see which one. But removing the animal's freedom and bringing it into your jurisdiction, your power. So says the Avnei Nezer, you didn't really change anything in the animal. There's nothing. It's just the same animal as it was 5 minutes ago. So that's what Avnei Nezer says. That's why it's so tricky, and we're only going to limit it to an animal that you want, because then at least you could say you've done something, and now there's a connection between you and the animal. If you don't want it and it's all preventative, then it goes back to like it's just inferior type. You're not doing anything. You're not changing anything. Says the Avnei Nezer. Venerally, tahainu time the davar shein b'no nitzot patur. Why don't you say all animals are chayiv? Right? All shchita applies to all animals. Right? The other malachas apply to all animals. Right? So why dafka by Seder? So he says the shiny malacha Seder mishar malachas. Seder is different, says the Avnei Nezer. Sheyesh ben shinui bedavar shnasa bo malacha. By all other malachas, there's a shinui in the object. V'yafilu hotzah, and even by hotzah, which Tosfos discusses, another Rishon quoted malacha gerua. Hotzah me rishus la rishus nishtana mashu rishus acher. At least there's something. The thing is in a different place. Avot Seder ein shum shinui b'guf achaya. But by trapping, there's nothing. There's no shinui at all. Rak eitzel ha'adam. The only difference is between my relationship with the animal. So it has to be a relationship with the animal. So only if you have a relationship with the animal. Shenase b'rshuso v'yalkein, and therefore davar shebamino nitzod l'tzora gufo. Therefore says the Avnei Nezer, by something that's normally trapped, that you trapped to get it, chashev b'rshuso sheish lo davar ma. Fine. Aval davar she'ein b'mino nitzod, but something that's not normally trapped. So then you don't really have a relationship with it. It's in your jurisdiction, but you just don't want it. You don't want the fly. Ein b'em to'elas klal. We say there's no to'elas with your trapping it. And therefore, objectively, ein lo klum. Af la'achar shenitzod. And therefore, it is going to be at most an Isser Dirabanan. At most an Isser Dirabanan. The Ritva says, in Shabbos Kufav, it doesn't go by juice. Right? If there's a non-kosher animal, that could also be subject to trapping daraisa. That's the Ritva. It's an important comment. Even though chagavim are tar and chagazin are tamei, become makom ne'achalam hein l'gayim. It's ne'achal l'gayim, and therefore it is going to be tzeta da'araisa. So number 1 is as we said, the species, mino nitzod. Number 2, when is it called trapped? When is it called trapped? So this is a big discussion, and there's a couple of Gemaras. When the dust settles, it seems like it's all the same idea, even though the Gemara uses different phrases in different places. So the Gemara in the Mishnah and the Gemara in Shabbos Kufav, on source 18, talks about different animals and are considered trapped or not trapped. We're going to talk about this next time. If you have an animal like a turtle, right? You don't even have to trap a turtle. A turtle is pretty slow, so there might not be a daraisa for trapping a turtle, because an animal has to go from untrapped to trapped. And if an animal is b'mahus trapped, so then there's nothing to talk about. But says the Gemara in Shabbos, Avi, what are you talking about? A bird and a deer and other animals. So says the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hatzot tzipor lemigdol v'tfila bayis. If you trap a bird to a tower, a deer to a house, that has removed its freedom and therefore chayiv. V'chachamim omrim, no, tzipor lemigdal, fine, I'll agree, but bird to a tower, but tzvi legina lachatzu lebibrin chayiv, right? Even if you don't bring it into the house, right? Even just to the garden. Rishim Gamliel omer lo kol lebibrin shavim. It all depends. It depends on every case. Zeh haklal mechusar tzeda patur. If after what you did, it's still called mechusar tzeda, it's still lacking trap. You can't get it. We'll talk about what the Gemara says, that how you classify that. But if it's mechusar tzeda, it's only going to be an issa d'Rabbanan. If it's not mechusar tzeda, that's called trapped. That's going to be chayiv. And the Gemara asks a stira between two brises. One brisa says that you're allowed to trap chayus and ophos from a bibar, and the brisa, the Tosefta, says you're not allowed to. So the Gemara says bibar gadol, bibar katan. Depends if it's a big forest, if it's a small forest. Hechidam bibar gadol. What's a bibar gadol? What's a bibar katan? Amar Ravashi. Kol hecha derad basrei. If you could run after the animal and lunge once and get the animal, that's called trapped already. Right? If it's outdoors, one lunge is not going to get it. But if you're in a smaller room or a smaller area, if you get it with one lunge, bibar katan, that's a bibar katan, and therefore putting it into a bibar katan on Shabbos is deraisa. The idach, anything bigger than that is a bibar gadol. Anything bigger than that is bibar gadol. And that's the issue going on here. What is called trapped and what is called not trapped? If you look in Beit Zachav Dalid, the next source 20, there's a different formulation. Amar of Yosef, Amar of Yudah, Amar Shmuel, Kol Sha'omer Have Mitzuda Unetzudenu. Mechusar tzeda means if you say, you know what, let's go trap the animal. That means it's not trapped yet. If you would go and use that lashon of let's go trap the animal, so then that is called, and that's in Beis. Why is that in Beis? Because even on Yantif, Tzad is not one of the malachas that are mutar mishum ochel nefesh. It's too early. You could have done that before Shabbos. It's not one of the malachas. There's a language of milisha ve'elach, but only the later malachas. You can't drive somewhere to get food for Shabbat, for Yantif. But here too, you can't do tzeda. And what is Have Mitzuda? So Rashi there explains, let's go trap. Klomar. Shetzarech levakish tachbulos latafso. You have to think of strategies to trap it. Hainu shiura de bibar gadol de lael ve'idach bibar katan. The same shiurim. In the Shulchan Aruch, in both places, just quote the two Gemaras. In Hilchos Shabbos, he'll quote Mesechus Shabbos. In Hilchos Yantiv, he quotes Mesechus Beitza. But that's what the Shulchan Aruch says in Shin Tezayin. Source 22. Hatzot tzipar dror la migdal shu nitzod bo. If you trap a bird to a tower that it is trapped in, or other birds, so then chayiv v'meino nitzo bo, and if it's not nitzod, it's asur d'Rabbanan. And the Shulchan Aruch Nechos Yantiv uses the Mesechus Beitza lashon. So tzorach lomar havei mitzuda nutzudanu. And we assume the Bir Halacha says the Chavetz Chaim. It's all the same shear. What's called trapping? Even though do you have to one lunge, or you have to say? So that's the same. It's the same measurement. Lo kasha says the Bir Halacha devar katzu aposkim de'idi ve'idi chad shiurahu. Chad shiurahu, and this is the background for the malacha of tzad. The Archas Shabbos summarizes in source 25, page 133. Hamevi bal chaim l'makom sagur. If you bring an animal to an enclosed area, pa'amim sheish bo iser Torah, upamim shenaseh l'midrabanan. Sometimes it's daraisa, sometimes it's darabanan. How so? If the new place that you brought it into is small. If I go in, I can now grab it with one bending, and we don't say, and I would say, let's go get the animal, not go trap the animal. So then that's going to be daraisa if you bring it in. But if it's big, you're going to have to work to get it. It's not trapped. So you limited the freedom, but you didn't take away the freedom. That's still going to be asur d'Rabbanan. Shein bazat say the gemura v'adayin ein balachayim mugdar kenitzon. Right? It's not mugdar kenitzon. If you go from there to smaller, it's going to be a daraisa. Because right now it's ein b'mino. It's mechusar tzeda. And also Rav Karelus also in the final source here in 26, he also discusses, if a bird flies into your house, is that trapping? It's going to be pretty hard. If a fly comes into your house, that's pretty hard to get. Is that even limiting the freedom? That might not even be limiting the freedom. He has just as much freedom in the house. The fly will spend many hours there, right? Than outside. So every animal has to be thought about separately, and every situation has to be thought about separately. This is all the background to Malacha Tzad. By the time next time we get into So what are the allowances and what are the lamaisa cases? How do you deal with a dog that you're training that's right now will go out at the door the second you open the door? Serious shilas that we will talk about. Okay, we'll stop here.